Bismillah walhamdulillah wassalatu wassalam ala habibina wa rasulillah Muhammad wa ala alihi at-tayyibin wa ala ashabihi at-tahirin wa man tabi'ahum wa atba'ahum wa da'a bi da'watihi ila yawm ad-din. Alhamdulillah, stopped here in Santa Barbara on my way home. I used to live here. I had some crazy idea back in 2002 after my very first visit to California. I had this crazy idea I was gonna move to California. I was so enamored with, I had gone to Northern California, I had gone to San Francisco to see my cousins who had moved there in the, I think they moved there in '91. We all grew up together in Detroit, but they moved there. And so I had a work opportunity or something, and I wound up going out there. And I was like, man, this place is amazing, right? And so I started trying to think of ideas, how could I get to California, right? So I got this harebrained scheme that I was going to move to California and go to art school in Santa Barbara. And so I did. That didn't last very long. It turned out to not be the greatest idea in the world. But I fell in love with the area. Like basically everything north of Los Angeles, I really fell in love with. So anyway. So on my trip up, I had a really great time teaching this weekend at the West Valley Muslim Association in Los Gatos, another super beautiful area that's in the San Jose region, and really wonderful community that had a very refreshing thirst for wanting to engage in learning about their deen. And so one person asked me, he said, hey, I see you talk a lot about fiqh, or I see on your Instagram you have a lot of books on Maliki fiqh, Islamic fiqh. You seem to read a lot of fiqh. He's like, why do you read so much fiqh? And I said, well, if you really think about it, the study of fiqh is not the study of fiqh is not the study only of individual acts of worship. In praying, fasting, making wudu, but of course, its jurisdiction over them. There's no doubt that obviously, in order to perform any of those acts, it holds jurisdiction over them, and we have to learn the fiqh, the comprehension of how to do those acts in a way that Allah Ta'ala, that God, of course, will accept from us. But I said, more importantly, or in addition to that, the study of fiqh is ultimately going to give a window into the study and the insight on how to build community. Right? How do we build community? So I gave him one example. I said, did you see recently, maybe about a month or so back, I had done a short little video about the Bab of Janaiz, right? About the chapter about funerals, from Sheikh al-Majjaji's book on Maliki fiqh that inshallah I hope to teach from. And I said, do you remember? He said, yeah. I said, do you remember when I read from that, I highlighted how in the way that Imam al-Majjaji, hafidhahullah, the way that he constructed his book is that he didn't begin with the ghusl and the kafan and the dafn, right? He didn't begin the Bab of Janazah on the washing of the body and the shrouding of the body and the burial of the body, and no, he didn't go into any of that initially. Obviously he covers it, but he actually begins with some of what is recommended to do while the person is in the process of dying, right? What do you do when the person is in the last stage of their life and they are dying? So in a quick summary, he said what? Stay with them, be with them, encourage them to say La ilaha illallah, alhamdulillah, encourage them to make a lot of dhikr, read Quran to them, remind them about Jannah, remind them about, Allah's mercy, and on and on and on. So what this shows is that in this case, in the tatbiq of fiqh, right, in the application of fiqh, because fiqh is really what? It is the circumstantial or moment of application of ibadah of Allah. It's like how do we worship Allah in different instances of this or that. But that's on the small level, like you personally praying wudu. How do you hold your hands in prayer? And starting with the right hand, the left, and so on, and making wudu, all those things, right? But what he's highlighting is that part of being Muslim, and therefore there being a collection of Muslims, is that death is something that lives amongst us. Death is something we don't shy away from. And so I said, imagine if we constructed our community in a way in which we had Muslim, not just having a Muslim funeral home, right, where people can bring the deceased to be washed and wrapped and buried, but we also have a service as an extension of that. We have a family member who is in hospice. We have a family member who is dying, and we can dispatch people to go and be with that person and be with that family until the person expires. Meaning that we construct we build the actual infrastructure of our community around our fiqh, right? Around our fiqh, right? So fiqh is going to be one of those things that we want to build and incorporate into the construction of the Muslim community from an almost urban planning point of view. What was really nice about this particular community up in Los Gatos is that, for instance, they purchased the masjid was essentially a former church, and the way that the church, and you'll find this here, like the church has a grounds, and on that grounds is obviously their kanisa, their little church where they go and do their prayer, and then they have another part where maybe they do like their Bible study or they do their learning. And then on the premises of the same place, they have apartments. And so, if we understand that the salah is magnified in its barakah umpteen number of times when it is done in jama'ah, then why do we not, for instance, construct our communities where people live on the premises of the masjid? Why do we not build a school and housing and all of that literally on the premises and then expanding outwardly versus just making as much money as any of us possibly can and then living in the fanciest house in the most prestigious neighborhood that we possibly can, right? To circle back around, this is why we study fiqh, because fiqh is beyond merely the performance of a certain act. Obviously, it includes that. But then when we are going to expand and to extrapolate that act from the individual to the group, to the community, then fiqh will begin to shape our lives. It will shape the very construction and the infrastructure of our lives. And so that's why I said, so we look at, Al-Majjaji's book and the way that he begins to even talk about janazah. He talks about it while the person is still alive, right? And so this, to me, is, as one of my teachers, he said, دراسة الفقه هو دراسة الإيمان والتطبيق الإيمان. He said that studying fiqh is essentially the study of faith and the application of faith. But it's not only, he said, shakhsiyan wal majmu'iyan, right? That it was both for the individual, but then obviously even extrapolating that out. So I just wanted to share that as a reminder. That is why fiqh is extraordinarily important. And that is why we need mutafaqihun. We need men and women who become trained in the science of fiqh and then teach it so that we're building our communities truly with the fiqh, the comprehension of what it is to really means to worship Allah. And if we look at, for instance, like most of our masajid have become non-profit institutions. And I know this might be a little bit controversial. Most of our masajid have become non-profit institutions as if that is a hukm shar'i. Right? Most of our masajid have become 501(c) non-profit, right, so that people can donate and get some tax break or whatever that it is. But the other sidecar that comes along with the 501(c), along with the nonprofit, is the necessity to have a board. And most of us know, probably 85 to 90% of the problems we have in our community, in our masajid, are from the board. And one reason that I can most certainly tell you, because many of those people are, well, some of them are well-intended. Many of them are well-intended, but guess what they are not? Mutafaqihin. They're not people of fiqh. So they do not know how to build communities according to the comprehension and the application of faith in Allah as it will be instituted on a daily basis. And so we can see that we also have a need for people in our community. In fact, I think that needs to be a big push. Anybody that wants to be a person of leadership in the community has to go through a verified process of being a mutafaqih, not a mufti, but a mutafaqih, meaning that they truthfully understand the fiqh of the deen and its application as it relates to the individual and as it relates to the broader group, right? Al-jama'ah. This might seem a little bit controversial for some, but I really think that we should think about this. I think we should really consider this to demand, because when we want the imam, right? We want the imam to be hafidh of Quran and fil qira'at al-ashr and all 10 qira'ats of the Quran. We want the imam to be a muhaddith and a mufti and a faqih and a babysitter and a dentist and a baker, a brickmaker and a candlestick maker, right? We want the imam to be all of these things. We also want him to do it for $40,000 a year with no days off and no time to even spend with his children or his wife, right? But the board, what do we demand of the board other than they can have popularity? Because most boards are done by election. Most boards are done by election, and so what are we talking about? Popularity. That's the only requirement that it takes. Just essentially, right. And like if you want to be the president of the United States, what is the requirement to be the president of the United States? You got to be born in America. You got to be 35 years old or older, and you got to be popular. That's it. That is what it takes to become the freaking leader of the most powerful country in the world. That's all it takes, is to be able to get the codes to nuclear weapons that could annihilate every single man, woman, and child on the face of the earth. And so I think we need to think about, if we're going to have the same demand for qualifications from imams, we need to have an even more stringent set of commands for the people that ultimately, let's just be honest, those are the people that are going to be the handlers and that are going to be the chin checkers of the imam. Right? They're going to be the handlers and the chin checkers of the imam. Right? They're the ones that are going to hire and fire him, and quite often he is fired at whim, right, with any due process. And they're the ones that are going to make changes in the community, and they're going to essentially build the infrastructure and the scaffolding upon which the community will either grow or die by. And yet we have absolutely no demands of qualifications from them. Matter of fact, maybe we should have a board of imams and shuyukh and ustadas and sheikhas instead of just popular community members. But I digress. The point is, fiqh is what is necessary not only to worship Allah on the individual level, but it is also what is necessary to not only worship Allah on the kifaya, on the broader level, but in itself to help germinate and produce the next generation of believers who will come after us. So anyway, I got to go in here and get this coffee, and I got to get out of this town because these people are crazy. Jazakumullahu khairan. See you inshallah this week. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.